But you have.
Hello. Hello.
Please go ahead, Professor.
Okay, thank you. We are sorry we are delayed, but we are ready to start. And as usual, we will start with a recap. And as we cool down, we were racing to reach the venue where we are doing this from. But as we cool down, we'll allow participants to feel free to say something about yesterday and also the previous day. So the recap is covering 2 days, day 1 and day 2. So feel free to say something that you learned or something that you unlearned. So feel free, and here we are. Hello. Anybody can go. Hello. Participants here. Voice, please go ahead. Okay. They are typing. Objectives are the heart and soul of the proposal. Yes, that is correct. Yes. Loud and clear, but doing a recap. So we are giving you opportunity to recap. Hello.
Dr. Nampala, maybe allow people to chat, to type in so that you can be able to answer them.
Okay,
because
fine.
where we cannot allow them to talk.
Okay, that is fine.
Yes, thank you.
That is fine. I get you. Okay, I see what Dr. Unyarara was saying. You're typing. So yeah, that is quite interesting. That's learning. Okay. Oh, please feel free. Okay, somebody had a question that was not addressed in the Q&A. We should be able to address all those questions.
We are busy. Good afternoon, Prof. and Dr. Nampala.
Good afternoon.
Yes, we are busy addressing the questions on the Q&A. However, we are not going to be addressing on questions related to the certificate of the last week's training. So we want to make it clear that we are going to be dismissing all the questions related to the certificates because we want people to focus on this training. So if you have registered and you did not get the certificate, if you registered for all the 5 days or so last week, we are going to see to cross-check if you get your certificate. Not today, not tomorrow. Yes, please. I hope that was clear. Please stop putting questions related to the certificate in the Q&A so that you allow the questions which are related to the subject of today. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. The other question is to answer. Okay, thank you. Hello.
Hello, we can hear you
We
now.
are finally ready to share. We've been uploading.
Can
Yes,
can you put one laptop on mute? There's quite some echo coming out. Yes, you can now speak.
Is that better now?
Yes, very much better.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Is that better now?
Yes, this is very fine.
Hello, please confirm that that is better now.
It's very fine now. Can you hear me? We can hear you now well.
Okay. So friends, welcome to day 3 of this workshop. It's a virtual workshop, and we are enjoying interacting with you, albeit virtually. And day 3, we're doing a recap of day 2 and day 1, as I said. We are also focusing largely on objectives, but the third item that we'll be dealing with today will be materials and methods. So yeah, after objectives, we'll go to the methodology. As was highlighted in our steps, you can see the program is very clear. We move step by step, and these steps can be engaging, but the logical step is that after you've constructed your objectives, you go to the methodology. Yeah. Now, friends, yesterday we talked about the problem tree, and this was being used as a tool to analyze, to identify and analyze problems. Without problem identification, a researcher will have a lot of problems. But we talked about effects, we talked about the core problem, we talked about the root causes, and we indicated that from the root causes, we derive specific objective. So a specific objective is at the bottom, the root cause. And once you address the root cause, then you open a clear channel for the nutrients to flow. Probably one of the things that we didn't emphasize, that we'd like to emphasize now, is to do with the application of the problem tree. And we normally call this moving from the problem tree to other components of the proposal. And you'll notice that in the leaves, where you have the effects, that is where you derive your what? Your significance of the study. So in the effects, you derive the significance of the study. So those items and bullets that you have in the leaves, and they write up 2 paragraphs of write up of those things in the leaves, will give you the significance of the study. Now, from the significance, we should be able to steward the focal problem and how it links with the effects. And that focal problem is actually the trunk of the tree. The big stem is the focal problem. So that focal problem, a write-up about the focal problem gives you the problem statement. And a write-up on the causes of interest that you've picked out and the associated causes around that specific cause that you picked gives you the rationale. We did hint on this, but we are only trying to tell you how important the problem tree is, and that even after developing it, it is not needed in your presentation, but it still helps you to navigate and write, have a good write-up that is very, very well connected. Now, again, we also talked about the linkages, and some people, day 1, day 2, talked about the conceptual framework. But if you look closely and you pick the linkages from the problem tree, you have started the process of building your conceptual framework and how it relates. If you've picked the low levels of income, how they relate to lack of knowledge, how they relate to unhygienic practices, and how they relate to the outbreaks, and then the mobility issues, then you're having very clearly laid out a linkage into your conceptual framework. And depending on how it is constructed and beefed up, you get the other frameworks that we are talking about: theoretical framework, theory of change, empirical framework, and so on and so on. So friends, this is what we largely said yesterday. Would like to get 1 or 2. I'm told you are muted, so Dr. Nyararo, please advise, should we use that strategy where we get at least 5 people saying something about the recap, or should we simply continue?
It's okay if you want us to unmute, we can unmute 1 or 2 people. Can you hear me well?
Hello?
Dr. Nampala, can you hear me?
Hello? Hello, do you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you well, but it looks like you're not hearing me. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello? Participants, can you please put in the chat if you can hear me?
Hello?
Okay,
Salma, hello, we can hear you, but I think Prof has an issue of
I
mic.
think they are having an issue with their microphone.
Maybe
Okay.
he can use
So
as
then
a
let's
laptop.
just continue.
Bro.
We can unmute people to talk.
Okay, so we will continue. We'll
Bro.
continue. Thank you for confirming that you can hear us. We now would like to deal with this issue of objectives, hypotheses, research questions, prepositions. Now, remember we said that the beginning point is the root causes. So we consider the root causes, construct the objectives, and then now move on to hypotheses. And then now move on to hypotheses, research questions. Now, a listing of the root or primary causes that we have identified is very, very important, and is the beginning point for you to separate them and know which particular root cause you're going to deal with. And we evaluate these root causes based on the urgency, based on the impact, based on the feasibility, and based on the interrelationship. Now, this evaluation takes into consideration the discipline of research interest, because when you construct the problem tree, you'll get a lot of things. Probably you're an entomologist like me, and then you'll get things to do with the other disciplines. So that is a branch that I would not follow because I'm interested in the bugs. So I'll follow a branch that is dealing with the bugs. You evaluate based on urgency, that which will lead to quick impacts and needed results, because there can clearly be a root cause that will take a lot of time to solve. And yet you're a master's student. You are working in 2 years and you would like to graduate. You're a PhD student, 3 years, 4 years, graduate. So the urgency, the impact, the geographical coverage and intensity, the feasibility in terms of budget, time, the human resource and capacity. And then as you write your proposal, whether you have 5 objectives or 6 objectives or 3, those objectives have to be interrelated, because the project is stemming from one stem. It is one tree, and so there has to be interrelationship. You don't go for engineering, then you go, then that becomes a program, not a project, because a program has many projects in it. So you have to look for the interconnectedness of these root causes. And you need to remember that there would be non-feasible root causes, and these can be used as opportunities for implementation of secondary causes. So you jump the non-feasible root causes, and sometimes these non-feasible root causes will tell you that there is lack of income. Now, you're not going to do research on lack of income. People will tell you that there is the shelter affects the catchment for water bodies. Now, you're not going to research on shelter because you can see the shelter within the community, that it is very clear, or they will tell you that this is a ghetto. You can clearly see that it's a ghetto now. So non-feasible root causes and non-feasible in terms of research engagement. So non-feasible root causes are not issues of
Prof, can you hear me?
An objective is in order to come up with solutions. Now, this is not a classical definition at a goal level. Even a goal is an objective. It depends on the level where you're operating. Your goal as a student could be an activity at the government. So a statement of the task or problem to be addressed in order to come up with solutions is an objective. Now, in terms of your thesis research and even other research, an objective should be simple and easy to understand, not only by experts in your discipline, but by everyone. Everyone, whether you go to secondary school students, whether you go, people who are not in your discipline, they should be able to appreciate and understand that which you're proposing. So simplicity is very key. Now, an objective for your thesis should be very clear and logical. It should make both scientific sense and socio-economic sense. It should be based on real situations and not imaginary issues, unless you are looking at discovery research. But yesterday and the other day, remember we said that in Africa we have so many problems and challenges. So there is no room for discovery research. And so the problems are real. And even when you choose to work on imaginations, getting and writing research proposals on imaginations is very difficult because there are no limits. You take this direction, it goes. You take the other direction, it goes. So that is one of the things that you would be assessed for. If you realize that you don't have boundaries and no scope, then maybe your problem is not real and it's imaginary. Now, specific objectives should be achievable in the time frame that you've earmarked. And normally, for grant writing and grant proposals, we normally say that this is what the donor is buying, specific objectives, and they should be achievable. What will not be achievable is the purpose, the goal, the aim, because the specific objectives are only contributing to those. But since they are contributing, then they should be achievable. And they can be achievable positively or achievable negatively. Because if you set out to verify something, if you set out to establish something, the process and the work of your methods may be such that you are unable to establish. And so you've come up with a research that has shown that the tools and the process that you've used does not take that direction. So research is not only positive reporting, but we also report the negative findings that we face. So it should be achievable within the resource base that you have, within the time frame, the human resource, the labs and other resources, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Now, remember we have said again and again that when we turn the selected causes into positive statements, then we have now started the journey of developing specific objectives. But good specific objectives should bear verbs. And the verbs that we use should avoid process-based verbs. Process-based, that our specific objective is to comprehend. Our specific objective is to understand. Now, how far will you understand? Or how far will you study? How far will you examine? So the process-based objectives are highly discouraged because they can't be assessed. That our objective is to learn more, is to know more. No. Yeah. Do we have a problem? They are not hearing? Okay. Okay, so give us a few minutes. So because this one, when I was setting it up, it was confusing. So that's why we are using this one. So what do? We take a 2 minutes.
Okay, we just want to make sure that you can hear us. Can you hear us now?
So what is the problem? They can hear?
They still cannot hear. No, they cannot. No, participants, I think the facilitators are not able to hear us from this side. That's why we are not able to unmute you and let you share or ask your questions as they were requesting. So they are trying to figure out what the problem is because we have just talked to them on the phone. So please give them a few minutes to sort out the problem.
What is the problem?
Yeah.
But we are presenting, so why would you want to talk when we are presenting?
Yes, you can go ahead then.
No, we didn't. Can you unmute and say something so we?
Yes, we
as
are.
I try
We
to
have
connect.
unmuted.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yeah. Yeah. You unmute and say something.
Okay, Prof. Now we're trying.
Okay.
You allow one.
I'm going to allow one of the participants just to say something. We wanted to allow participants when you were requesting, but you could not hear us. Let me just try to allow one participant and see if you can hear
Okay.
them.
Okay.
I'm unmuting Nigusi. Nigusi, can you talk? I've allowed you to talk. Unmute and talk. Say something.
Can you confirm whether we were loud and clear?
Okay, Prof.
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Ask them if they can hear the person
Can't
speaking
hear.
now.
You can't hear?
Talking now, Prof. Are you?
I think your presentation is very nice. It's clear. Don't be so upset. You can continue, all right?
Okay, they cannot hear.
Hello? Hello there? Hello there?
Yes, I can hear you, Nigusi, but the
No,
problem is
but
the
we want to hear
facilitators.
through the computer, not through the phone. No, we didn't. We didn't.
Okay, that's fine. You Nada.
Yeah, I'm trying to start this other one. Okay. Okay, so we were talking about the verbs to use. The verbs that you use should be output based, and sometimes there is a very thin line between output based and process based. But friends on call, you'll agree that if you looked at theses, the determined is so common. Determine. Yeah. So develop, demonstrate, analyze. Now, one would argue that analyze is process based. But the difference between process based and output based is actually the word output. If you are able to show, if you're able to show the output, then that becomes an output-based statement. So if you analyze a protocol, you are able to show that you analyze. If you set out to find out, then you are able to show that you actually found out. So it is important that you choose the verb that you use carefully. Yeah, we have now been able to switch on the second computer. Of course, there is a bit of echo. So let us reduce the volume here.
Yeah, we can still hear you well. The echo is okay, but can you hear us?
Yeah, we now can hear you.
Great.
Clear.
Yeah. So you can now continue. The problem is we're not hearing us. In case you want us to open up for someone because they wanted to talk, but we were not hearing us, we can actually do that. So you can continue with the presentation.
Okay. Okay, please. So we can continue. The presentation was loaded on here. Now. Okay. Okay. So I think we would like to just transfer it. But then the problem, this was screen sharing. Okay. We can stop the screen sharing. Just let's stop the screen sharing here. Okay. Then we transfer it here. Sure. Sorry, colleagues, about this.
It's okay, Prof. It's okay. But when you were presenting, it was okay. They were getting the training, except that if you want us to give permission, you are not hearing us.
Okay.
So just continue where you stopped.
Yesterday there was something about African and the Uganda, and European. So maybe the computer made in Europe is misbehaving. The one made in Africa is is compliant.
Yes.
That was a very interesting discussion. I enjoyed it. Okay. Let's see. Day 3. Okay, do you see the slides?
Yes, it was coming up, but it has not yet started showing on the screen.
It says screen sharing has stopped. Okay, let me try again.
Yes, we should try again. Yes, we can see it now. Just put it on
Okay.
full screen.
Okay. What is happening? It's still opening. Okay. Now you want it on full screen. Yes. That's what we are, but it's dancing a bit. Okay, full screen. Okay, so there we go.
Yes, it's clear now.
Yeah, I think we were at this point. And I think we had finished going through the slide. Friends, sorry for the loss of time, but the verb that you choose for your specific objective is very, very key. You have to demonstrate that at the end, you'll have an output. It is an output-based objective. And the objective should be, as they always say, SMART, specific, measurable, appropriate, realistic, and time-bound. This is a very well-tested acronym, not just on developmental objectives, but even for your thesis, you need to be very specific with your objective. And this helps you to avoid different interpretations. If you said you wanted to do this, what do you actually mean? Such that you are spot on in terms of getting what you want. And that which cannot be monitored, which cannot be evaluated, it has a moving target. So you cannot, and if possible, there should be an indicator that points to numerical terms. So you want to establish this how many protocols or something. And appropriate to the problem, appropriate to the goal. Why are you doing this research? So the problem links straight to the objectives. That's why you see we are coming from the problem analysis, and then it should be realistic in terms of time, achievable, yet challenging and meaningful, and so on and so forth. Now, here is an example of what we would call ambiguous objective. it says to evaluate 4 improved mango varieties. Now you can see which varieties, 4 improved mango varieties. But which varieties? Are they elite varieties? Are they local varieties? Are they Mediterranean varieties? So, because there are so many, and under what conditions are they to be evaluated? What criteria will be used to evaluate them? And linked to what problem in the solving strategy? Because many times when you ask students to develop a problem tree, they will come up with specific objectives that are not anywhere linked to that negative statement at the bottom, which you now turn into a positive statement. And then what is the science behind? So all these components are normally included in the objective, and you see them playing out. Now, I think we have more examples, but we would like to link these to the hypothesis and research questions. Please, my colleague would like to just say something, just to add before we move to the hypothesis.
Yes. From the primary cause, you state positive, it becomes an objective, but not quite straight away. Because if you say evaluate, you can anticipate the primary cause to be is lack of information on these improved varieties. So the action is to evaluate. Okay, evaluate improved mango varieties. Now, if you stop there, that's not an objective, it is actually an activity. But when you link it with the effects, the problem that communities are concerned with, then it becomes an objective. Okay? That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you, and I'm sure this will raise quite some interesting discussion. And feel free, we have some other examples that we're going to share, but we wanted to link them up with hypotheses and all research questions or prepositions. Now, of course, we know from our statistics courses, from our research methods training, that an hypothesis is a tentative guess to a possible research outcome. And that this tentative guess must be statistically presented. So it should be testable. And it is stated in the positive, which is the alternative, or the negative, which is the narrow hypothesis. On day 1, there were some questions about this, the narrow and positive hypothesis, and we were telling you that we would get there. Now, the hypothesis defines the nature of your study in line with the stated objective. When one looks at the hypothesis, then they will know that your study is an exploratory study, or it is a case study, a longitudinal study, it is an experimental study, and so on and so forth. Now, a well-crafted hypothesis and or research question will very often suggest the best way to perform your research and give clues to your research design. So this is an area where students take a lot of time with their supervisors, because you state an hypothesis, then you're doing a survey. But the hypothesis requires experimental design. And sometimes the students take really long to see this, and it causes a bit of challenges in the supervision process. So it is important for you to know that the hypothesis stemming from the objective is the springboard of your research design. Now, the hypothesis, of course, is driven by the nature of study, sometimes with the deductive studies, we may not need an hypothesis. We may be dealing with grounded theory. You know, sometimes grounded theory is leading to development of a theory. And the deductive study is such that for every finding we get, we do a what? An assessment to see whether we can move on or we have gotten what we want. And so in that case, you cannot start with an hypothesis. Sometimes the hypothesis actually comes in the middle of it. So you've got some observations, and then you have some pattern that is coming out of those observations. Then based on that pattern that is coming out, we can now develop a testable hypothesis, which now leads us to a theory.
So something like characterize.
Yes.
Is deductive.
Yeah, characterize
Because
is deductive.
it means you don't have information at all. You are just going to find out what they have on the ground.
Yes. Okay. And after you've characterized, you know what you know what you have on the ground. And then you can develop, yes, then you can develop a testable hypothesis.
Baseline is actually
yeah, baselines don't have hypotheses, they are deductive. But when you have inductive studies that are grounded on theory, you remember the other, I don't know how many of you here know the methodology of grounded theory. Grounded theory is a research method that deals with the exploratory studies, observations, and data saturation points. Now, inductive studies, the theory is established. And once the theory is established, then we can come up with assumptions and guesses that what if I add fire to this? Will it actually burn? Or what if I increase the heat on this rubber? They said that to get this rubber or to get steel, you must put it in a furnace of 7,000 temperatures. Now, what if I get this steel and I subject it to a higher temperature?
And a certain pressure.
And a certain pressure. Will it melt back to steel or and so on and so forth? So then now you develop tentative guesses, which are the hypotheses. Now, when you develop the tentative guesses, you undertake your experiment and you make observations. And once you've made observations, then you can be able to confirm. Now, this flow chart is very, very important because it will tell you in which category you are lying. Many theses force themselves to go to the hypothesis side because the guidelines in the university have said hypothesis. But you'll find that your objective does not need an hypothesis because you are starting with observations right from the word go. And it is those observations that form some known, some evidence of a pattern. That when we do this, this happens. When we do this, this may not happen. But when you don't have any direction or clue to any direction, then you have to start that direction with observations. So I hope this tickles your mind to start thinking seriously about the nature of your studies. In European universities, as you write your proposal, you have to clearly state whether you're a deductive student or an inductive student. And that helps a lot because then the methods are clearly sorted out. Yeah, but now in many African universities, we struggle with this. Then we have mixed methods and whatever. In some universities, mixed methods is not allowed, especially at master's level, because they would want to give you direction. So you can start, that this is where we get quantitative researchers, qualitative researchers, You need to clearly show that my study is going to be qualitative or quantitative, and then you move on. Now, in qualitative research, the use of research questions as opposed to hypotheses, and even sometimes objectives, they will simply put a research question, an objective. So it's more frequent. And some of the characteristics to this is that there is use of words, what or how. So you specify whether the study discovers, seeks to understand, explores to describe the experiences. And there is use of non-directional wording in the question. So the questions describe rather than relate to the variables or compare groups. So there is a description, and there is no, if you're comparing, then that is quantitative research. Then you need to subject and create some statistical tests. But in qualitative research, the direction is non-directional. So the questions are under continual review and reformulation, and will evolve and even change during the study. So even after pre-testing, you will see that the question had a challenge. So you can evolve and change the question, which is not very typical in quantitative research. You don't start changing treatments. Once you set out the treatments, you move with them. Once you've set out the sample size, you move with it. Once you've set out the testing, the blank and what, you move with it, the controls. So the questions are usually open-ended without reference to literature or theory. And there's sort of a single focus. The focus is on that. Their experiment is the population, the social engagement. So there's a single focus. If they are dealing with the community that smokes, so they would not say, let us now again consider people who smoked previously. No, if you smoked previously and stopped, you are not a smoker, so you are not part of the sample size. So there is a single focus in this. Now, for quantitative research, the ball game is different. You can use research questions and objectives, and you get this into experiments, and you need hypotheses, which are more frequent. Those hypotheses can be comparing between variables, or can be looking at establishing a relationship between variables. Now, the character here is that the testable preposition is to be deducted from theory. So there is something known about the theoretical underpinning. So then we need to understand it from the theoretical part. And then there is independent and dependent variables to be separated and measured separately. Now, we are not going back to your applied statistics or biometrics. And for master's students and PhD students, this should be making lots of sense, because our assumption is that you've studied this. And even passed your course units. So you know what an independent variable is, what a dependent variable is, and so on and so forth. Now, to be either writing a research question or objective or hypothesis, but not in combination. So when you have research questions, they are still stemming from objectives, but then we will not expect hypotheses. But when you have objectives and hypotheses, then we will not expect research questions. Because it is these two that you're testing. You're testing either the hypothesis or you're testing the research question. So in your research, you cannot be double testing. Yeah, you cannot be testing a question and then testing an hypothesis. Because the hypothesis in itself is a huge question that is boxed into the null and alternative hypothesis. Now, we consider the alternative forms of writing and make a choice based on the audience for the research. Now, remember we said the alternative hypothesis is the positive, while the null is the negative. Now, researchers and scientists will always look for the positive side, and that is why we normally say that we do not reject because of the evidence we have seen, but we instead fail to accept.
An example of positive. For example, yeah, or it is there.
Yeah, okay. We fail to accept, and the reason why we say we fail to accept is because we are operating in the alternative hypothesis, which is yes, the level of significance.
Because
and
it fails at 1%, may pass on at 5%.
Yes,
or 10% for breeders.
Yes. So the levels of significance, and even as we test the alpha level, and we are testing it now at 5%, with advanced science and the tools of testing, what we have discovered may be obsolete. Yeah, for example, there is a lot of bacteria that was previously characterized as fungus. Yeah, so that's the alpha level was at 10%, but now with modern tools, PCR and what you have, we've now been able to characterize this fungus more specifically, and their bacteria. So that means at the time when the researchers were testing, they failed to accept at 95%, and yet the answer was within the 5%. So with modern science now, we have found that the answer is actually in 5%. So we have disapproved those people that failed to accept. So now we accept. So we operate in the positive sense. Now, in terms of generating the research hypothesis, remember the objective is coming from the problem. So from the problem is where we are getting the research hypothesis, because we only stated the problem positively. So this is why this schematic diagram here is talking about generating a research hypothesis from the problem statement, which we have now made an objective statement. So the initial idea is often very vague and general. It is coming from the statement. And remember, like my colleague here said, when we are coming from the problem tree, we have only had segments of the problem. So we have to state it, include location, include this. And the reason why we are saying include location, it is possible that what you're testing in the highlands, yeah, there are agroecological differences. So that's why you need to say, determine the level of this and this in the highlands, or in the East African islands. Because now, when we go to other islands, the temperatures are different, and what you find there may not necessarily be the same as what you will find in another place. And so this is what it is. This is the schematic diagram for the research hypothesis that leads you to a specific deductive prediction. Now, it's important for us to know that every hypothesis or research question stems from an objective. You cannot have a research question that is standing alone on its own and you say, yeah, but every research question is stemming from an objective, just as every hypothesis is stemming from an objective. It's also very important to know that not every objective will have an hypothesis. Yeah. Yeah. Not every objective will have an hypothesis. And we've given an example, characterization studies. If you're characterizing varieties, the fact that they are called varieties, they are different. So you cannot now not say that our objective is to characterize sorghum varieties grown in the plains of Uganda or in the plains of the Sudan. Now, the fact that they are called varieties, you cannot now come up with an hypothesis to say that there are differences or there are no differences in the sorghum lines and the cultivars that are cultivated in the Sudanese plains. Yeah, and this is a common mistake. Many theses that you read have actually been passed with what we call tautological hypothesis. Tautological in the sense that they require an hypothesis. If one specific objective can have more than one hypothesis. And this is what we call a compound objective. Now, this is common for PhD studies because there is a lot of interrelationship in the need for you to build new knowledge. So your objectives are not that obvious. And because they are not very obvious, they tend to be compound objectives, that they combine many variables of study. And once you're combining many variables of study, then you have a compound objective. I am hoping that we have some examples, but I could give an example right away that we normally talk about. If you are determining the performance of milk and milk products, determine the performance of milk and milk products in the niche markets of Europe or in the niche markets of Central Africa. Now, you know, we are now talking about determine milk, performance of milk and milk products. So first of all, you have an hypothesis on just milk before milk performance, before you even start the products.
And the products will be many.
And then the products will be many. Yes, you have yogurt, you have sweets, you have cheese, you have whatever. So each of the product, because the methodology of generating that product is different, then each product has its own string of research. And so the hypothesis will be different. Yeah. So you can see that that's a compound objective, and that determine milk performance and milk products in the market. You even with just milk performance, that can be an hypothesis. Does it perform the flavors, what, the butter fat content and what? But then now milk, before even the butter fat content, there is also a market attached to it. Yeah, so the milk and the market will have an hypothesis around it. And so you can have as many hypotheses as the products that you're talking about, because in your write-up, you'll clearly indicate what products. Of course, we have said milk and milk products and their performance in the niche markets. But in your research and write-up, you sort of delineate and remove some products. You say now, you say we are dealing with products that are common in home states, or those that are high value, or those that are necessary for niche markets. And so you sort of have eliminated other products. You're not dealing with all. But even if you're dealing with 3, from what I have said, if you choose 3 products, the way you make Yogurt is different from the way you make sweets, is different from the way you make pasteurized milk.
Even the yogurts have different.
Yeah. Even the yogurts, there is probiotic yogurt, there is yogurt which has the vanilla flavor, there is and strawberry and different flavors, and each of those has its own methods of making, and so you'll end up with different hypotheses.
But I wanted to add just a little that for masters, normally the objectives are straight.
Yeah.
There's no and.
Yeah.
You probably will take the milk
Performance.
niche
Milk
market
performance in
alone
niche
as
market.
one of the objectives.
Determine
And
the
then-
performance of milk.
Yes. In those different supermarkets. I mean, niche markets.
Yeah.
And probably even the markets you may have to select which markets specifically does it apply to, and then you go for the what's the other one?
The products.
Milk products, and again you select
A specific product.
Yes, you rank the products, select the highest impact factor products, and which markets specifically.
Okay, thank you. This the null and the alternative hypothesis and how it is designated.
Next week.
Yeah, and next week, if you don't know, maybe that course of next week should have come earlier than this one, but that's what it is. Now, again, the testing process. And the degree of challenge to the hypothesis will depend on the type of problem and its importance. It can range from just seeking a good enough solution to a much more rigorous challenge. The challenge could be you are dealing with falsification, repeatability, rectification, validity, refutability, justification, verification. So there are two possibilities when we are verifying. Either there will be nothing or there will be something. Yeah. So if there is something, that is the alternative hypothesis. If there is nothing, that is the narrow hypothesis. Of course, that is put in the layman's language for us to all understand. And we give special consideration to the narrow hypothesis because this is due to the fact that the narrow hypothesis relates to the statement being tested. And whereas the alternative hypothesis relates to the statement to be accepted. When the narrow hypothesis, when we fail to accept, we don't actually reject, we fail to accept. Then we find a conclusion once the test has been carried out, and it is always given in the fail to accept, the negative, narrow hypothesis. We either fail to accept HO in favor of H1 or do not reject HO. We never conclude with rejecting H1 or accepting H1. So this is statistical semantics that I'm sure you understand. So we conclude and make conclusions based on the hypothesis. The narrow hypothesis represents a theory that has been put forward either because it's believed to be true or because it is used as a basis for argument, but has not been proved. And has a serious outcome if an incorrect decision is made. So that's why we test at the alpha level. And the alternative statement is a statement of what a hypothesis test is set out to establish. And frequently the alternative is actually desired conclusion of the research. And in statistics, we do this type 1, type 2, and we are trying to explain to you when we don't reject HO and yet it is the right decision, then we have performed a type 1 error. when we take the right decision and yet it was not the right decision, then we have committed a type 2 error. So a type 1 error is often considered to be more serious and therefore more important to avoid than the type 2 error. The type 2 error occurs when the narrow hypothesis is not rejected, yet it is false. Yeah. And the reason why this happens, I've given you one example, the tools of science. The results that we were getting back in the days when scientists were using paper chromatograph are not the same results that we are getting when we are now using PCR. So you see, so type 1, type 2 errors here. Now, I don't know whether we should go through this example, but probably what we need is simple example. I think these are obvious things. Yeah, yes. There are examples here. Objectives stated. There is objective 1 here, and this research had 4 objectives, and each of the objective has a hypothesis. Determine the reaction of cowpea lines to flower thrips in different agroecological zones in Uganda. So the author says there is a difference in the reaction of cowpea lines to flower thrips. Remember, we said if you're looking for difference in the cowpea lines themselves, then that would be an obvious yeah, because the lines are lines because they are different. But here we are looking at their reaction, how the lines react to flower thrips. And you might find that you may have 2 different varieties, but when their reaction to flower thrips is severe in both cases, or moderate, so this is okay. So those are examples here.
But on example 1, determine reaction of cowpea lines to that. Now, that might not be a very smart objective. Rather, identify the reaction. Identify cowpea lines with the high what? Say, for example, high resistance to thrip something is more specific. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, in the objective statement, there must be a change you want to introduce in what is prevailing. And that's why we say, down there we say evaluate. Evaluate is good, but what kind of news are you trying to introduce after evaluating? Somebody should see the value that you are going to bring out from the routine work. Otherwise, if there's no value, then it is routine work.
Yeah. Which should be done by a technician.
Yeah, technician.
Daily engagement. No, it's not research
in the field. Yeah. In fact, it becomes adaptive type of research. Yeah.
So, friends, I hope you've seen those examples, but there are also more examples here. Improve poultry egg productivity using feeds fortified with cassava meal. So the hypothesis here is about fortification of existing poultry feeds with cassava meals increases egg productivity. Now, sometimes students state the objective in the same way as they are stating the hypothesis. Now, that means there is something wrong. Either the objective is not well coined, and so the objective becomes the hypothesis.
But also, if you are improving poultry egg production, you certainly use materials that have been proved to be able to improve poultry egg production. So that's not research.
The research was already done.
Yeah, the research was done. The the ingredients are available. So now you select which one is going to improve. In other words, if you use that as a research question, turn the objective into a research question. And you remember we talked about research question will allow you to evaluate the probability that the answer exists. And if the answer exists, then that's not a smart objective or smart research question.
Yeah, so now onto this slide, as you can see, the biological scientists will have an hypothesis. But the same objective can have a research question or preposition. So the methods will vary. For you to study the food fortification of existing with cassava meal, you'll have to do an experiment and actually mix these feeds and have cages where you're feeding birds and what, and evaluate. Now, in the research questions, to what extent will fortification of existing poultry feeds increase egg productivity? This research question assumes that fortification of poultry feeds is already happening. And because it's already happening, I can just go and do purposive sampling. Who are those farmers, poultry farmers who are using fortified feeds, and then get their feedback and publish. While the other one who is saying fortification of existing poultry feeds with cassava meal increases egg productivity cannot use a questionnaire. Now, what we find in your theses is that we find that somebody looking for evidence of fortification does the questionnaire. But evidence of fortification requires you to fortify and use the ratios and have a control where you've not fortified and what, and that is an experiment. Yeah. Okay. Another example, increase maize production in Western Sudan using integrated organic and mineral N and P fertilizers. Again, these are the examples of hypothesis and research questions. A research question is actually in the same bracket as a preposition. A preposition is what are you proposing? What is your question? Yes. And that which you're proposing can be investigated to see whether it is correct or not correct. These are additional examples, and this is the example we gave, a compound objective. Enhance niche markets and value addition of milk and milk products for increased household incomes in Eastern Uganda. So you will see that this one will have a lot of hypotheses. And feel free to think about the research questions. What would be the research questions for this kind of objective?
And the news there is enhance. If you remove enhance, it becomes routine research. Yeah. There's nothing you are promising as an output.
Here is another example also of a compound objective that is dealing with the ICT, agriculture information, not artificial intelligence. Uptake pathways and dissemination of ICT-based knowledge communication products for increased household incomes. So there is an hypothesis on enhancing ICT, increasing income. Then enhancing AI as the uptake increases household incomes. Then dissemination. And you can get more hypotheses. So what would be the research questions? Okay.
That's screen. It's a good example.
Yeah.
Screen is an activity.
Yeah.
But why are you screen? Actually, the examples I think we even download the improvement.
Friends who would like to, here is an interesting example from the social sciences. That increased elephant crop damage has been reported in some villages. So that's an observation or an effect. And elephants have changed their movement patterns. This is a problem. To mark out the moving pattern of elephants, the objective. Louder. What are the moving patterns of elephants? That could be the research question. Or are the elephants moving along normal migration routes, or are they roaming more widely than ever? Those become the research questions. I think this is the last slide, and we would like to bring this to a close and welcome some discussion before we move on to the next highlight. Hello, are you there?
Yes, we are here.
Yes. Yeah, it's been a mouthful from our side, so we would like to pause it at least for now. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in the Q&A.
Hey.
I don't know if you would want us to open that, or maybe one of you will be answering them in the Q&A while, and then we give chance to people to talk.
Where does the verb investigate belong? Now, the best way to answer this question is there a study that does not investigate? Because every study investigates. In fact, this is important because sometimes we have redundant wording in our objectives, redundant wording in our titles, because some people will say some investigations on the effect of. Now, that line, some investigations on, is redundant. Yeah. You just start from effects of and you move on. But every study investigates. Yeah, so why would you want to use investigation as the verb? And I think it's a process-based verb. It's not an output-based verb.
And it's vague.
Yeah.
You need to be specific on what you mean by investigation.
Okay. Praise Muloma says, is there a limit for specifying your specific objective? Maybe a specific number. Is there a limit for specifying your specific objective? Maybe a specific number. I think this question came up yesterday as well. Is there a limit to a specific objective?
When you are writing, you should not limit yourself. The budget is going to restrict you, and the amount of time you have for the research. So you'll come back and see, rank the objectives and take those that fit within the resources.
Yes. What about assess if used as a verb?
Assess is a method. Is a method.
Yeah. It's a process.
Yes. What you want to find out after assessment
should
be the keyword.
Yeah.
In there.
The reason that you want to assess becomes the objective.
Yeah. Understand is not a recommended verb to use. Understand, investigate, but examine. There are some that are very, on the border, on the borderline. Examine, analyze. I think those can be taken. Establish, not so much for a master's and PhD. You need to be specific on what you want to do. Find out. I think for social sciences it would be good because it has an output. Find out. Show. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a request for materials. Yeah, we've promised right from the beginning that we'll get the materials to you. But then also, Reforum and partners have done you well. They have a YouTube link that captures this interaction, and that it comes to you live. So I think that is the beauty of technology right now. So if use of layman's language are advisable in research, for example, instead of as shown in the slide, I don't understand this. Is use of layman's language allowed?
You see, we said you cannot write for everybody. At thesis level, you have a target group, scholars, and people in your discipline. So what you are calling lay language should be lay to the discipline, to the scholars. And because you are going to be marked, you don't want to use language that is below that category of people. Because then you will be underestimating the understanding, sort of. So you need to work within the language that that group can understand. And the writing should be that you don't need to be around to explain what you meant by whatever. Write completely, write sequentially, and always have the authors in front of you as you write. Imagine the author, the reader is in front of you, and imagine the kind of questions that they will be asking as they read, and try to provide a narrative answering ahead of time. So next.
Kindly, how can you hypothesize in your proposal before getting the results on your project? Our assumption is that the students have gone through statistical study, because you cannot get results, then hypothesize. Because an hypothesis is a tentative guess to the solution. Yeah, so you can only have a tentative guess of the direction, the way things will take, if you've not yet gotten results. Is it necessary to use both research question and hypothesis? I think we said this in the presentation.
The thesis might have components, some that are quantitative and some that are, like if you have baseline, and then before you do the other part, then you'll use both research questions in the baseline and then hypothesis in the actual study. Although I discourage putting baseline in the thesis because they are not related. A thesis is a message. Now, if you have two different messages in the thesis, then you are off. It is either quantitative or qualitative. And if you the baseline should go in methodology.
How many pages a proposal is supposed to have at the university? But a proposal is not expected to be very voluminous.
Yeah.
15 to 20 pages.
Even 20 is a bit
20,
high.
yeah.
But follow the university guidelines, ask the supervisor, because everybody has their preferences. Don't try to do what the supervisor is going to criticize.
Okay. Definitions, independent, dependent variable. I think this is back to your statistics. Yes, statistical.
But we can say this, that if you have earmarked your study, you will have what they call treatments or factors. those are fixed. And you are going to manipulate them to see what happens on certain, we call them parameters. For example, if it's a plant, a crop, there are certain things that are going to be influenced. Some within the harvestable, the parts, some within growth, some within physiology. Now, those will be the dependence, because their changes are depending on the treatments and the factors, if you want. Now, ideally, the best research should be that you select the most sensitive parameters to the treatments, because those will give you news faster than if you took non-sensitive parameters. Of course, non-sensitive will be influenced, but you will not get quick news compared to if you use the sensitive parameters. I don't know, I hope I've not confused you more.
Okay. You wish to determine the effect. Okay, yes.
Okay, no, it's okay. You have so many more questions, but there was also one who wanted to share their screen and show the problem tree and that they have come up with from yesterday's training, I think.
That is great.
That's
we
great.
we can immediately close.
Okay, let me get Machulu. Machulu, can you please can you share your screen? Unmute and share your screen. I've promoted you. You should be able to share the screen now. Can you please share the screen? Machulu, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Please. Yes, we can hear you. Can you share the screen?
All right, let me just do it. Hope you can see the screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Moses Achulu from Uganda.
But can you close this thing up here so that you allow more space for the on top of share there? Are you able to see what I'm talking about?
Then he can also minimize, just
Or minimize the, yes.
make it smaller. From 100, he can make it maybe 80.
Okay, it's okay. It's okay. Just to minimize. Yes.
Is it okay?
No.
Okay, we said minimize the page, not the whole application. Just down there where there is hundreds, the size of the template, make it 80. See the right corner down there.
Right down. Okay, just a minute.
I think stop sharing and share again.
Okay.
Okay.
Is
Now
it okay?
click in the page. Yes, now click in the page so that you get out of the footer and the header. Click on the content inside the page.
Just do double click.
Yes.
Okay, is that okay?
Yes, I think they can see. Prof, are you able to see the screen? Yes, Prof, you are muted. Yes, Prof, you are muted. Are you able to see the screen? Maybe you can just tell them quickly your tree, which one is the branches, which one are the roots, which one is the stem. I mean.
Yes, yes, I can see. I can see.
Okay. Thank you so much, professors. Basically, the idea or the problem is about COVID-19 and education, and especially TVET education, technical and vocational education. So down here, where we can see, I hope you can see down here where I am.
Yes, yes, I can see.
Yes, I have like the root causes down here. These are like the roots of the tree. And
excuse me, just tell us briefly.
Yes. So learning during COVID-19,
yes.
Schools were shut down. Most of the learning that was being done face-to-face was shifted to online, and therefore every institution needed to shift online. Every teacher or lecturers or tutors needed to acquire those skills of online learning, so that the learning could shift online due to COVID-19. So when I come to the STEM here, I assumed learning.
Where was this? Where? We want to locate where it was. In Kenya or in where? Uganda?
I'm talking in Uganda.
Okay, okay.
In Uganda.
Okay.
So there was shutdown of all the schools for almost 2 years. Learners could not go back to school, and therefore learning had to continue. And the only best way to continue was to shift from face-to-face learning to online. So the problem, or the tree, the trunk of the tree, the stem, e-learning cannot be taught online because of its practical nature. Okay, there's something missing there, but it's supposed to be a TVET learning, technical and vocational education, cannot be taught online because of its practical nature. For example, if you go to those kind of institutes that are teaching practical things, scientific things and so on, that needed maybe laboratory training, that needed hands-on training. It was impossible or not possible to be handled online. Then if I go up to the tree or the branches or the effects, of course, they are both positive and negative effects. And assumingly, there was new adoption of models of education that can, or there should be adoption of those educational models that can combine, or that can feature, that can factor in the practical learning that is not possible when it is done online. And then, of course, that leads to the shift in the paradigm of learning. And then TVET learners dropped out of school. So many of them dropped out of school because they could not afford. Others could not afford. Other institutions as well could not afford to come up with the online and then that kind of learning that would accommodate everybody. And then TVET sector was left behind. Much as the other institutions could afford to start online learning, these kind of institutions were not able to teach their courses online because of the practical nature. Then, of course, the teachers and learners. Teachers had to learn new methods of teaching, especially the online methods, and very many of them were not able to, because they had never been introduced to online learning and even blended learning. So where I'm trying to go to blended learning. This is all that I try to sketch out of the problem tree analysis. I just did it about an hour ago or so, and I hope it makes some sense. And of course, I hope to gain more from you.
Okay. Thank you very much. You did quite a bit of thinking through, but maybe we could start with the STEM.
Yes.
E-learning is not a problem. It was an intervention to the problem, isn't it? It's not a cause, it's an intervention. So we
Yes.
need to get the proper problem to account for the stem. What would be the problem that would be caused by e-learning? We can turn e-learning into a cause by saying the use of e-learning was impaired by da 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 da. But as an intervention to the problem.
Yes.
Now up here, if you can bring up.
Yep.
The people who are seeing these problems, I think it would be the students, the education, Ministry of Education would be seeing a number of problems here.
Okay.
And therefore we have to state this in terms of products of the education system that are going to be seen by anybody. The negative effects should be put here.
Okay.
So when you say TVET sector left behind, that's not quite sharp. Left behind, what do you mean by left behind? Behind
okay, what I meant is that TVET, with its practical nature, would not shift some of their courses online. So it forced some of them to close down, while other universities and learning institutions were able to shift onto online learning.
Would that be an effect? Because up here we have effects. Okay, we can look at teachers to learn in new teaching methods. I mean, what's wrong with that?
Well, that was, I think that is a positive impact, because every teacher will be forced to learn these new techniques or new norms of teaching, so that they can be shifted to the next level, which is online learning.
Rather, we should look at the quality and quantity of education achievements in here, in the effects. Okay. And how do we measure so that we know that the trunk has affected the effects? Maybe drop in something, quality of education, but what quality are we talking about?
The quality that we can talk about here is, learning is now, it covers wider area where anyone can learn where they are. An example that this training, we have so many people from around Africa. People are there from Zambia, from Mozambique, from Nigeria, from Uganda, but they're able to attend this training, as opposed to if the training was hands-on, or it was practical, or it was face-to-face. Say it is in Makerere University. People from Nigeria would not be able to attend. People from Zambia would not be able to attend. And I think that's a positive impact. Or
I think yeah, of course, we are going to look at the impact of e-learning. It will have both positive and negative. But in this tree, what we see up in the blue thing should be the effects of the problem arising from the trunk.
Okay.
COVID impaired learning in Uganda.
Yes.
I think that would be like the problem, the trunk.
Yeah. Yes.
COVID impaired, and that will be in the narrative, in the introduction, you are going to explain how it impaired and what you think, could be improved And what could be improved become hypothesis. If you will do this and this and this within the e-learning, we will improve its performance. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but we need the effects here, the group that is affected should be able to tell you how education in Uganda has been impaired. And then for you, you go down and now to analyze what has impaired, what exactly has impaired. Well, it is use of e-learning. One of the causes is use of e-learning or inability to use conventional learning can be one of the boxes. Inability to use conventional learning, then constraints related to e-learning, and then each box will have what are the causes of failure of conventional learning. Huh?
Okay.
Physical movements were stopped, and so on and so forth. And then under e-learning, some of the causes of the poor performance of e-learning, teachers lacked capacity to teach using e-learning. Facilities, those are now different boxes. Facilities for e-learning, or cost, high cost of facilities for e-learning, and need for practicals for e-learning, and so on. And then you keep dropping under those, because each of those will have causes. And you go for other causes until you reach a point when you cannot answer to the cause of a given cause, and that will give you the primary cause. I don't know whether I'm clear.
Yes, you are clear.
Yeah.
I am getting a lot of sense. So I want to ask.
We know that problem analysis is complicated. It needs a lot of time and practice. But the time we have available for virtual interactions is so limited. And we really commend you for having at least come out with something.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask just one more question, one thing. If I am to include, because now I should be moving towards getting the result or to solve, to come up with some kind of model that can handle or solve this. So if I said blended learning, I would handle both, both online teaching and then face-to-face. And of course, there I would be moving towards coming up with the model that would bring together both online, face-to-face, and the practical, the practical part of learning, which is actually not captured in either online learning or in face-to-face learning. So how would I present that I want to come up with that model? Which part of the tree would that be?
You realize yesterday we said in teasing out this tree, you might be having something in your mind that you want to quickly go to as the primary cause or the root cause. This is one of the cases. You already have where you want to go, and you are just using this to justify you to reach there. Rather, in this process of problem tree analysis, allow every possible outcome.
Okay.
And then select them flexibly, rank them, select what is coming out. In this case, you have already the end point in mind. And you want to end up with a cause that relates to blended learning.
right? Assuming so.
So rather, there should be a cause that blended learning is going to be used to see whether it works. In other words, it's going to be part of the hypothesis. Blended learning enhances e-learning and so on in Uganda. But of course, we don't have COVID anymore, so you will not have a COVID environment within which to test it.
Okay, because I'm assuming when COVID-19 simply opened up the eyes that there are pandemics that are unseen that may come in future, and therefore we have to be prepared with the models that will handle such situations as they come.
Okay, and that is strategic research. Strategic research is preparing for the future. If a problem is in Congo, you know it is coming, and you prepare the communities to be ready to fight it. That's okay. That's okay. You can strategize on that.
Would that be a good research for a PhD student? I am enrolling, and this is where I'm looking at.
I think it would require a little bit more reading and thinking through, so that what you are going to do is straightforward to you, and you can assess its feasibility in terms of funding, in its time frame. Yeah, and I think for PhD, look at developing some models or improving some in doing something. I think that would be something that is coming out for the first time. And it is addressing a critical problem.
Okay, if I say, for example, already there are stated models that are being used today in the many universities, in fact, blended learning models that combines face-to-face and online learning. But in the component of the online learning, which is being promoted, not only because of COVID or because of these pandemics, but because of the technological advancement which we are seeing today. And now the problem that I'm seeing, the inner problem, is that it has not been easy, or to have this practical learning, to have the practical learning, as a component of this online learning. So I'm thinking,
You see, now that is an observation. So can you develop a model that will circumvent the need for practical learning, which is not possible by e-learning? Come up with something that is going to replace the need for physical, practical sessions, so that the student eventually gets almost the same knowledge as conventional learning. If you can get us a model like that, you are off with your PhD. And of course, you can test the model and it does not work, but you have done your work. I mean, you have results.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Machulu. I think you've gotten quite a good time with your intervention, and also others have benefited. So please also look through the chats. Other participants were also trying to comment with regard to your research. Maybe I'll give only one person to talk so that the professors can go on to the next topic of today. So I've given rights to Same. Same, are you able to talk? Okay, Same is not there. Let me get another one. Okay, I'm going to give, I'm choosing randomly, so I'm going to give to Rose. Rose, can you please unmute? I've given you rights to ask your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Introduce yourself quickly, where you are connecting from, and then you ask your question.
I'm Rose from Egerton University, MSc Crop Protection, and I would wish to share my work on problem tree. So let me just try to share it.
Okay, let me just, you should be able to share now.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it.
Yeah, please try to make it very brief because they have another part of the presentation that will come in.
Yes. Oh.
Are you having problems with sharing?
Yeah, I'm trying to get it from my laptop so that from the desktop. So there's a place written join as panelist.
Please click that because that's what will allow you. I've been trying to promote you so that you are able to share. Okay, now you can share. Can you please now share your screen? Rose, you are muted. Rose?
Yes, yes.
Can you share your screen, please?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm trying to get it from the...
Maybe we give someone rights, then you can share at the end.
Okay, okay.
You seem not to be finding it. Is there anyone who is ready? Please just raise your hand. I'm coming again to randomly pick. Now I'm going to get let me get Tobias. Tobias, are you able to talk? Tobias, please unmute and talk. Bruce. Okay,
Anna,
Tobias.
it seemed like he did not join as a panelist.
No, at least he can talk because I've
You allowed him to talk, eh?
I allowed him to talk.
You need to unmute
But
himself.
he has to unmute. Okay, we give to another one. Farayola Charles. I've given you rights to talk. Please unmute if you can. Yes, Farayola, you want to share the screen or you have a question to ask?
No, I don't have any question.
Your hand is up. Okay, that's fine. Let me ask. Okay, let me just lower all the hands. And then maybe we can move on to the next session because the time is also going. Then we address questions later after the session. Prof, you can go ahead with the presentation.
Okay, we are transferring it, but maybe I can clear the chat. Okay. Can you see something?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. 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 Remember, we are following the specific objectives as our reference point. For everything we are going to write, we will follow specific objectives. Unfortunately, it would have made a lot of sense to use participants' outputs of specific objectives. But after getting the specific objectives, ideally, if you have more than one objective, we are going to have each objective addressed in terms of what should be done. And the materials and methods are a set of things and procedures, or equipment and procedures that are necessary for implementing research. And if you recall, we are still using the story-like approach. We have a title, and then we tell somebody a story in form of a proposal. So every part of the proposal will be written like a story. We really discourage bullets because bullets are not for stories. The story lies with the presenter of the PowerPoint if you are going to use bullets. But what we want is a written document or proposal that will be self-explanatory to whoever is reading or evaluating. So we discourage the use of bullets. Okay. And you know what a story means. It has a starting point and an end point. And the news in the story goes on increasing. But in this case, we said we use inverted pyramid. So every section you go on becomes more focused and less suitable to everybody else unless they belong to that bracket of target readership that you have chosen. In this case now, the target readership is the people of your discipline, and more precisely, your university supervisors and those who will attend the defense. So the language is going to be scaled down to those few people. Yes. At this level, you should be able to select the best procedures and best equipment to use in conducting this study. I should, after reading this proposal of yours, I should be able to assess your readiness to undertake the research and the capacity you have to undertake the research through assessing the logic, the way you are flexible with what you are writing. Okay. Yes, and I should be able to assess what you are suggesting against what should be required for your type of work. And then the feasibility in terms of budget, timelines, and facilities. One time we had a student who wrote a proposal which required facilities from South Africa. And she came up with 200 samples, and each sample was $15. So you can multiply and see for a master's, that will almost take the whole budget of the master's. Can I use this? No. Yes. We also should be able to appreciate the logical flow of activities in order to optimize efficiency of use of resources and time. In other words, your proposal should suggest the quickest way of getting results and hopefully the cheapest, the lowest cost that should be involved. Yes, and above all, readers should be able to quickly understand what you are saying and assess. And it is even more with the grants. If you're applying for a grant, the bracket of readership is even bigger to include the executive managers who probably have nothing to do with the kind of research you are proposing. Okay. Okay. Okay, now, every reader has what he expects from methodology. And as I said yesterday, materials and methods are normally written for quantitative research, where you have a lot of investment in materials and the procedures that you are going to use. But if there's a limited investment in equipment, we can as well call that methodology or the approach. We can afford to be vague, but here, and this derives from grants, application for grants, because the donor, whoever, wants to see how much is going to be invested in this study against their budget. Okay, now in the writing materials and methods, we normally start with what type of study are we doing? Field experiment, greenhouse, laboratory, surveys, or protocol development. Protocol development is like a laboratory procedure you are trying to develop. So the consumers are the labs, the technicians, and the scientists. Of course, from the hypothesis, I will have already imagined that you are talking about an experiment. But from materials and methods, we needed to know what type of experiment, field or greenhouse or lab. And for those of you who have read a lot, research papers and proposals, normally it starts with the study area. Where is this study going to be done? Whether it is a survey or what, we need it to know so that we are able to appreciate the suitability of the environment this work is supposed to be done. Okay. And then when will it be done? Ideally, we need to know when will it be done. Therefore, within the study area, we want the reader to appear as if he is with you in the field. And there might be selection, justification of why you selected that area. Agroecology, landscape, and so on and so forth. Maybe the crop you are investigating is largely grown there, instead of going into another area where it is not grown. So we need to appreciate all this. But by so saying, I don't mean you have to write about the study area the same way all the time. For example, if it's an experiment, we might expect climatic information, soil type, vegetation, and so on. But if it is socioeconomic or economics, there's no way you are going to justify including information on soil types, rainfall, and so on. And if it is a greenhouse, the information on the climate may not apply unless you are referring to climate as affecting the source of materials that are going to be used in the greenhouse. Okay. Okay. Next. Okay, then what will be done? More, we are looking at treatments or factors. We use factors for non-experimental studies. For example, if we are studying gender and education, therefore what we need is to now unpack agenda into factors that we are going to investigate and see how they relate to certain things as outputs of education. Treatments are basically with the experiments, and we need them at the forefront. And we need them clear. If you are going to investigate fertilizers in both PhD and masters, fertilizer is vague. We want, what is it in the fertilizers that you want to look at? And if there are multiple things, list them. If it is fertilizers, okay, that's the main treatment. Then when you subdivide fertilizers, that's what we call the structure of a treatment. Level of fertilized nitrogen, 0, 20, 50, and so on and so forth. Nitrogen is the treatment, and the other levels are the structures of that treatment. Okay. So some guiding questions. Of course, we know most of you have written methodology, and methodology will not be, in fact, it is something you should write without a lot of citations, because this is what you are going to do. And we should be able to appreciate that you know what you are going to do. What will be the study factors? I've already talked about that. What will be their structures? What will be the design to be used that fits these treatments and their structures? Will the study be factorial or some kind of arrangement, split plot, and so forth? And maybe when you're choosing the design, why are you choosing that design? You find many proposals talking about RCBD, randomized complete block design, even in the greenhouse. I mean, when I read that, I will know somebody is not proficient in what he's writing. A randomized complete block design in a greenhouse or in a lab. Greenhouse, yes, but in a lab, because the kind of space you need is very small, so variation in the environment will be very limited. And then some will do randomized, completely randomized design in the field. That also means that the student is not clear on what he should use. Okay. And if you are using randomized complete block design, that means you are taking account of certain variation in the environment. Maybe the sun is coming from this way and then changing with the time the whole day. So the plants that are in a given space in the greenhouse will be affected differently. And that's going to confound your results, your treatments and results. So you need to divide up the reps in such a way that a certain category is affected equally in one area and then another one in another area. Yes, then there is replication. We replicate because of that variation and the unknown variation. We replicate, and there's a minimum number of reps you should have. But also, we repeat the study, especially field experiments. Even a greenhouse study, for those of you who have done greenhouse study, the first time you do it, or first round, you are going to make a lot of mistakes. And when you repeat the second round, the mistakes will be fewer and you will be able to even plan ahead, acquire equipment and so on ahead of time. And so you are going to increase the proficiency as you repeat. And in many cases, we drop the first round because you're not going to get results that will give you limited variation or standard error. I don't know what you want to call it. If you include the first round, your standard error will be very big and your means will not be what would have been expected. You will have 0 yield and 100 yields, and the mean will be 50. Now 50 represents neither 0 nor 100. And so you can see how variable your results will be. Therefore, we want repetition. For field experiments, this season might be droughty, the next season might be a lot of rainfall, then the third season might be almost the average between the first 2 seasons. So the more you repeat, the more you strengthen your means, and the more you reduce on the standard error. Standard error or what are those errors? Standard error?
The standard error, the difference.
Yeah, standard error of the differences. You become more precise with your output, your results, your data. Okay. Now, as you do this work, what precautions should you take note of so that you avoid those external errors? For example, some of these are not written, but if you are going to use different field assistants all the time, that can be a source of error or variation. Okay. One time we did an experiment on certain soil fertility with sorghum, and we realized over time that sorghum, is it sorghum what? So shoot, is it?
Sorghum shoot.
It is the shoot, not the virus, that black thing.
Sorghum shoot.
The fungus that maybe powdery mildew. We realized that as we walked through the experiment, there was a distribution of plants with that fungus, that black thing. I don't know, I don't remember the name of it. It was evident in the field. So we thought we could now take advantage to find out whether it was treatment related, because I mean, that is now free information. We didn't plan for it. And so we took samples and we realized that actually it was more along with the paths. And in other words, people who were working in the experiment were the ones distributing the spores. Okay, so if you are going to use different field assistants or technicians, their care, their commitment, their, concentration is going to be different. And that is going to mar your experiment, and you might get wrong results. So those are some of the precautions. Okay. What kind of data? At some point, then you write about what the parameters you are going to measure. You remember we said you can measure parameters, but it's good to assess those that are highly sensitive to the treatment. Some of them might be physiological, even before harvest. Some of them might be growth. And of course, growth is going to take different formats. Plant height, for example, leaf area index, dry matter accumulation, even before you reach grain yield. And grain yield will involve size of the ear, number of seeds per ear, and so on and so forth. So you have a range, but select those parameters that are most sensitive, because they are going to give you data quickly and more accurately. Now, after selecting, tell us how you are going to collect data, that kind of data. Okay, and using what and when and how frequently are you going to collect the data? Of course, you can collect as frequently as 10 times, but the frequency should be informing the results we are going to get. And there should be a reasonable number acceptable. Preferably, if it is a plant or a crop, it should be following the life cycle of the crop. Okay, so that at different stages you are taking samples and you are going to track what is happening through the cycle. And that will enable you identify which part of the cycle is being affected by what as you get back to analyzing your results. Within the methodology, we also want to know the practices that may be unrelated to the experiment. I mean, the experiment may not be about wheat, but we need to make sure that we minimize competition, and we call that routine. For example, for maize grown in Kabete in Kenya, of course, if it is unrelated to the study, we do it the way the number of times recommended for maize in Kabete. We don't have to reinvent the wheel because that information is available. Now we do that to increase efficiency in our experiment, but also to feed into the budget, because each time you go to weed, it's going to cost you money. So you'll get the the average per weeding times maybe 3 weeding, and that will feed directly in your budget. Okay. We need a chronological, we need a sequential narrative of everything we are going to do. If we blanket some things, doing the budget is going to be very difficult. And planning the time for doing those things will also be difficult. If you are going to use a procedure that is public knowledge, is published, you don't necessarily need to redescribe it in your proposal. Rather, you cite the source. You cite the source, and the source should be able to provide an elaborate information that somebody is going to use. Now, I will say this before I continue, that a good proposal is one that is written and can be used by another person when the author of the proposal is not around. For example, somewhere in the middle of your study, you get an opportunity to travel, maybe to US for a conference, maybe, but then just along the way, there are certain measurements to be done. There are certain things to be done in your study. Somebody should read your procedures and may not require to consult you to be able to do what they are doing. So your writing should be such that it is complete and sequential and precise. Otherwise, if anything of those is off, the guy will be imagining what to use to measure. Maybe, for example, what type of water to use, either tap water or distilled water, or rainwater, or well water. If you apply any of those in your experiment, you'll get different results. So what you write in methodology should be clear, precise, complete. Don't assume that that is obvious. It's obvious to you, but may not be obvious to somebody else. Okay. Yeah, if you are going to sample frequently, finally, when you do your table, your figures, the plotting normally follows certain intervals, fixed intervals, not varying intervals. For example, after every 2 weeks. Now, if you do, the first interval is 1 week, then the second interval is 3 weeks. Then when you come to plotting your graph, you're going to have problems. Because although that is accepted in log scales, because the log scale will not have equal distance intervals. Okay. Yeah, how will you sample? There are acceptable ways of sampling. If it is socioeconomics, there are some formulae. Somebody mentioned a certain formula yesterday, which you may use. And I think there are different formula for different studies. If it is a quantitative, the sampling we want to know, is it going to be randomized? Is it how far away from the border of the plot? And some people, after harvesting, say maize, they will randomize the number of maize cobs randomize and take a fraction of that, and then you work out in the end backwards to the plot and to the hectare. And then how will you handle? How are you going to use open drying of the ears of the cobs, or are you going to use an oven? If you are using an oven, at what temperature, and so on and so forth. And then after drying, are you using a desiccator so that atmospheric moisture doesn't come back to the seeds? We want all that. And if there are laboratory analysis to be done, how will the samples be taken? And of course, you have to tell us which analysis you want to do and how to do them. Okay. Again, if some of the analyses are described in a routine manuals, we wouldn't like you to describe everything, but you must read the manuals before writing the proposal or while writing, so that you really see the suitability in terms of resources and in terms of your discipline, so that your work is not queried for considering obsolete procedures. You need to really go and read the manual, and before you cite, you say, so and so 2022 as a source of information. When you do your viva, you will be asked, and you will not say, my sample was analyzed in Australia. No, you must read the procedure, and if possible, ask those who analyzed. So, because you have to own the whole process. Otherwise, those in Australia might have used something else, and now you are writing from a manual, and you are saying we use this. Okay. Okay, now data analysis. Materials and methods normally end with the data analysis. We want a description of how you are going to analyze data. Some people just copy that description, and that's the problem. I think there's need to match the data analysis with the field design. Paul, is that true? Yes, the field design and the way you analyze the data statistically should have agreement. Otherwise, you are going to cause another problem. Okay. And therefore, you need to justify in many cases. Okay. Yeah, sometimes you need, actually many times you need to use a range of designs, even within the same study. Because then you use different tools to get your data outputs and to prepare yourself for the discussion, presenting results and the discussion. Okay. Okay. Of course, some of the data exploitation tools will come out based on the data you have collected. probably not envisaged at the time of proposal writing. Okay. Yeah, and then you might include things like GIS, that is furthering the use of your data, by plots, and so on. So that now.
That was one of grammatically expensive.
Okay. For socioeconomic studies, of course, we need the most appropriate models for doing the study, collecting data, and analyzing. Of course, many times we talk about questionnaires, but we need to be specific about the tool, the actual questionnaire we are using. And this is dependent on the characteristics of the population we are investigating. We can use a checklist, especially for what are those informants? Key informants or group discussions. And then, although most of the work in socioeconomics is qualitative, sometimes we convert qualitative into quantitative for quick analysis using scores, different scores. And people rush to say, I use the SPSS for data analysis, even when they don't understand what SPSS means. It is incumbent on you to thoroughly understand SPSS and the selection of tools within SPSS for your data analysis. Because during the Viva, somebody will not spare you about SPSS. And once you cannot answer, then everything else you are talking is irrelevant. For greenhouse, as I said, of course, we have to describe the internal environment, environmental conditions, humidity, temperature. Usually we say the experiment was done at room temperature. What does is there a standard for room temperature? Because windows and doors are open, and so this will depend on where you are geographically. Okay. But you may need to talk about the external environment from where your materials are being derived, because they play a role in the type of material you have used. For example, soil. The soil development and its characteristics heavily depends on the external environment. So for us to be able to know the effect of soil factors, we should have had a background about where the soil came from. Okay. Okay. After all this, sometimes you asked for outputs from this work. Ideally, if this was a project, big grant project, they would be talking about the kind of things coming out that are helping to solve the problem you have described in problem statement. What kind of, for example, we said milk production and quality in relation to niche markets. So we'll need an output on, or outputs on milk production, and then outputs in fact improved products from milk as outputs. So those have to be listed. And sometimes in reading the proposal, the donors attach value to the outputs and see whether your project is worthwhile, the investment. So you have to say something about what will come out of your thesis research. I think that's all I have for now. I don't know what time do we have? 4:45. So we can have some questions, but of course I know that now the sections we are working on are more familiar with what you have read and what you have written. The battery is almost off. Your battery is off. So you should be able to, applications you tend to run into, and as participants, you can also answer to some of the questions that colleagues are asking. So you are welcome.
Okay, thank you, Prof. We have quite some questions in the chat. They have now reached to 80, especially not in the chats, in the Q&A. In the chats, they easily disappear. You can be looking at the Q&A questions if you are able to see them, and then you just run through and try to respond to some of the questions, and probably we give 1 or 2 people a chance before we close it up.
Okay. So can you read that?
Abero Diambo, what is the minimum and maximum amount required for masters and PhD? This is not clear. Amount of what?
I think we'll leave that.
I think some are asking for emails. We have shared our emails. They are also onto the slide, the initial slide, the introductory slide that we use. There's our emails and contacts. And when you look at the YouTube link, that slide still comes back. So emphasize again on the presentation of results, the significance statements. When we will be talking about how to write an effective introduction, and we will talk about the significance.
Significance,
rationale, all those. How do you determine the sample number for experiments?
That's something you agree with your supervisor?
But there's also a formula, depending on the study that you're doing. Oh, yeah, there is, yes.
So explain.
Determination of adequate sample size. Please share something on this. Yeah, the sample size depends on the population, which we call the frame, the sampling frame.
It depends on that, but also cost.
On the cost, yeah, and other parameters. And there's a lot of literature on sample size determination, including information in the standard tables. Yeah, so once you calculate, you can now work it out from the standard tables, and then you get the sample that you're going to work with. Yeah. So from your statistics, you should be able to arrive at this. Please visit your biometricians or statisticians, and looks like the course that is coming after this we'll have a lot of information on this.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe we can give, there was one question that I saw in the question Q&A asking, can one cite a video or movie?
Yes, I remember that question right from the start. Yeah, the answer is yes, as long as it is available, because it will have a link, it will have a source. You know, when you cite, you have the source. We should be able to refer to that information. So it is literature, so we can still cite.
Yeah, but for scientific research, some of those, for example, the Prime Minister's speech, you can cite, but usually the Prime Minister doesn't write their own speech. So when they are speaking, they can damage some of the messages with their political whatever. And sometimes they read the speech without even understanding what it is about, without their own input. So we need a verifiable video that will present itself with the professional evidence. And the professional evidence in science is normally related to empirical data. That's the challenge. Same thing with the citing newspaper. Newspaper is not a professional source of information. Maybe lightly in the introduction, but not so much elsewhere. But we can now reflect on it in the conclusions to say, well, what was being published is not correct, because we have verified it through, and in the end, we can reflect on it in the conclusion as either true or not true. And when he said true, we give the extent of manifestation of the problem and probably possible ways of intervention in the report.
Thank
Are we
you.
still, time
No,
is still.
Yes, we have very few minutes left now, but maybe before we close it up, let me give to people. I would suggest that Rose, you'll share your problem tree tomorrow at the beginning of the session. I can see your hand because it might end. So let me give a chance to two people for just questions. I'm going to unmute Nancy. Are you able to talk? Can you unmute? Please, if I mention your name and it means that I've given you rights to talk, please unmute and talk. If you don't, we go on to the next person. Edinancy Patasalirwa. Okay, you're not there. Let me give a chance to the chance to Lopez. Please unmute. Okay, Edinancy, go ahead and ask your question, please. I see you have unmuted.
Thank you so much for the session.
We cannot hear you. You are very low. Can you please get closer to your microphone and speak louder?
Thank you so much for the chance and for the session. My question goes.
Okay, let me just confirm with the facilitators. Can you hear her well?
Very lightly.
Very lightly, but we hear.
Okay, they can. Okay, please go on. Put on a bit high on your volume, but go on.
My problem is about registration. We are unable to register. I've ever registered only once later.
Okay, please. If you have been able to register using the registration link, please put in the chat and confirm. If you are also having problem, just indicate in the chat. Okay, that's okay. I'll check that out in the chat. Lopez, can you unmute? Lopez, are you able to talk? Okay, we're going to go to Hope. Hope Kansime. Can you unmute and submit your question? Okay, I'm going to give the last chance to Seth Chikuku. Can you unmute?
Yes, thank you so much. Name is Seth Chikuku. I'm a State University from Kenya. I have a question on sample size. I have a lot of problems when it comes to determining the correct sample size. And the most important is required, that is formulas that are scientifically backed up. So something said about that.
Yeah, maybe the best thing we can do is to demonstrate this tomorrow. We can, because there has been so many questions on sample size. So maybe we can demonstrate it and even come with references on that equation. Because there is an equation and it is taught, that is our assumption in the research methods, in the biometrics courses. So the best we can do is to demonstrate it tomorrow and get the literature, Gomez and Gomez, I know it is there, and demonstrate it. Yeah.
But also, you agree with your supervisor. They might have different ways of doing it. What we acquire here is to back you up. But when you reach the supervisor, make sure he's agreeable with what you are suggesting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Next.
Okay, thank you. Let me give to one last person. One last person. I'm looking in the hands. Latif, are you able to talk? Please unmute.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yes, I have seen situations whereby when someone is writing quantitative research, they only write specific objectives, then they go to research questions and they do not include the hypothesis. Is it something that is right, or? So I wanted clarity on that. Thank you.
Did you say quantitative research?
Yes, quantitative research.
Yes, quantitative research would be answering hypotheses. So you would expect specific objectives and then hypotheses because there is a measurement.
Okay.
Yes. So instead of research question, we would expect hypotheses.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much to all the participants and then the facilitators. I think before I give the chance to my colleague to close the meeting, please, if you have, like, I know that you've put in a lot of questions in the Q&A which were not addressed. Please go and read about them. If you have not found the answers, again, you can try in tomorrow and we see how we can tackle all the answers. So, okay. Let me close the meeting. Okay, my colleague is not available to talk right now. Let me bring this meeting to close. To the facilitators, we thank you so much for all that you are putting in this training. And thank you so much for even the way you are addressing the questions and all that. It shows also the high level of participation in the chats, shows how much you are of a great job you are doing. And the participants, I know the questions are many. We are not able to respond to all of them, but please come in tomorrow again. Go and read more about what you are asking and bring the questions back tomorrow. So we hope to address most, if not all of them. So thank you very much. We see you tomorrow again. Please, if you have not registered, you may be able to see the link even on our YouTube chats. It's probably there, or even on some WhatsApp group chats, which were being shared. So with that, have a nice day and let's see you tomorrow. Thank you.